Hello everybody. Today we're going to do quilting for the kitchen or your dining room or another room in your house. And so there are lots of ways that we can quilt items for our home. And one of the things I wanted to go over is have you look at things a little differently. So when you go shopping or maybe when you go to someone else's home and you see things that you like, make a little note to yourself that, oh, I like that. Maybe it's something that you saw. Maybe it's the colors. Maybe it's the style. I do that often when I go to the mall or different places. I get inspired, and inspiration is very good. Inspiration is what helps keep us going. And so we're going to do quilting for the kitchen. This is hosted by Tin Lizzie, and I'm Denise, and I'm excited to present today. So, a question for you. What would you quilt for your home? Do you have things that you've already quilted in your kitchen? If you're on the live session, go ahead and type those in the question box and let me know what you've quilted for your home. So here's a table of 8. Well, it's a round table, so maybe you could make a round table topper, a round trivet, a round centerpiece in the center of that table. Maybe you do placemats or a runner or an octagonal shaped item. There are lots of items that you can do. And so for me, I've done a variety of things. I have quilted things from my kitchen area all the way to my bedrooms. I have quilts on my beds. I have wall hangings on my walls. In my TV room, I have quilts on that wall and little wall hangings. So many of you have said that you've quilted placemats. Some of you have thought about quilting placemats, but you never have. So it really depends on what you like to do. Now, Brenda says she's done placemats and lap quilts for her living room, and there are lots of different things to choose from. So depending on what you've done, you have a variety. I know Barbara has quilts that hang down her staircase area. So when you walk down the stairs, you're always seeing quilts there. So let's start with the kitchen and a tea cozy. Now there are lots of patterns available. Maybe you shop at your local quilt shop, or you shop at a local store, and in that store they have patterns. And so there are lots of patterns to choose from. Maybe you see a pattern and it doesn't call for it to be quilted on the quilting frame, but I'm here to tell you today it can be quilted on the quilting frame. So if you look at the little tea cozy on the left, quite cute little tea cozy, very simplistic, and the pattern is the same. It's 2 pieces cut the same size that sit over top of a teapot. And you might serge the edges if you have a serger, or overlock the edges if you don't have a serger, and that's a specific stitch on your sewing machine. So 2 patterns the same size, 2 pieces the same size, serge the edges, and then you're going to sew a little tab or a button on the top. And you'll probably bind it just like you would a quilt, binding all the way around the bottom. Now the one on the right, that is a pattern, and that particular piece is a rectangle that is bound with binding, and then there are little ribbons that tie it up around the teapot. And I thought that was quite cute. Now, I have quite a few teapots, but I actually don't have a quilted tea cozy, and I have made them in the past. I just don't have any. I've given them all as gifts. So a tea cozy is a really nice way to make something for your kitchen, and makes for a great gift. The other thing is, think about this. If you do a tea cozy, maybe it has a pocket that holds the tea bag. Kind of a unique idea. You could do that, and it would make it quite nice and has dual function. So, you know, your quilted pocket could just be round edges, decorative serged edges, so to the outside of the teapot. What about pot holders? How many of you have made pot holders? Now let's talk a little bit about the pot holders, and let's go back to the tea cozy for a second, because both of those, we want to talk about the batting that you would use on the inside, especially for a tea cozy and pot holders. There might be some other things in the kitchen we do the same thing for, but you want to make sure you have the right batting. Now, there's a batting called Insulbright, and that batting, what it does is it gives you the warmth and keeps the warmth inside of what it is you've quilted. And there's also tater tot batting, and it's great for potato bags, and it's 100% natural. And why do you want that? Because when you put that potato bag in the microwave, you don't want it to catch on fire with something that's not 100% natural. So the pot holders, I would probably use Insulbright with that. Now, these pot holders could be quilted fabric that you were practicing free motioning on, and you just use that fabric to do the pot holder itself. So there are finger pot holders, there are full hand-covered pot holders that look like a mitt, and then there are little handheld pot holders. So depending on the look you'd like, there are a variety of different types of pot holders. Now, what about coasters? Coasters are quite fun and unique, and I really like making coasters, and I have a little pattern that I'm going to show you and that I like to use, and it's made with 5-inch squares, 5-inch squares. And when I first learned this, I learned this in a little town called Shipshewana, and there was a young lady and her little sister, 2 little Amish girls, that were making dinner for our Quilt Guild retreat. And the little girls did a demo of these little coasters, and they were quite wonderful. Well, then what happened was I wanted it with just a little bit more substance. So I took some of my pre-quilted fabric, and I actually made the coasters using the pre-quilted fabric. And what I ended up doing is using the back of that, the back of the piece with my pre-quilted fabric. So it might not be a fabric that is the best that I quilted. It might be one that I tested on. So this is what the little coasters look like. And the original one is 5 squares, a square on the back, and 4 squares on top. So when you look at them here, they look pretty simple, you know, which they are. But until you see how they're made, it's like, well, how did you do that? And some of you may have made these before, but I'm going to show you just a little bit different way of making them. So the 5-inch squares are folded in half. So they're laid a rectangle down, a rectangle, rectangle, rectangle. And then you sew all the way around on your 5th piece. And then you turn this inside out. So I'm going to turn it inside out, and it becomes the little coaster. Now it can hold a glass that's on a stem if you want, or not. It can also just be a coaster that something sits on. So here's the coaster that I just showed you turned inside out. Well, if I flip this one over and bring it closer to the camera, this piece here is actually quilted. So this was one big quilted block, and I didn't like it, so I cut it up and used it for the back of these 4 coasters. So just another nice little thing that you can do for inside your kitchen area or your dining room area, or something like that could even go into the living room because it is coasters. Now there are lots of books out there, lots of patterns. So I found this one that I had, Quick to Quilt Coasters, and they're little quilt blocks, and I thought, well, how fun and cute are those? So you could make them fancy, or you could make them very simplistic like what I had there. Another great gift or another item that you could use within your home or in your kitchen would be a casserole carrier. And you make quilted fabric. You need some Velcro. You want the sew in, not the sticky back. So you're going to sew this in. You want your regular sewing machine and a rotary cutting mat. What you're going to do is you're going to measure the casserole dish, and the casserole dish needs to set in the center rectangle area. That center rectangle area needs to be just a little larger than your casserole dish. So if you have a 13 by 19, I add 2 inches all the way around. So if it's 13 by 19, it's going to be 20 by 14, that bottom rectangle. Then you're going to take and knead 4 other rectangles on that same piece, or they could be sewed to it that you bind. And what you end up with is a piece that everything folds on top of each other. So looking at the photograph, the piece on the left would fold first, then the piece on the right, and they Velcro together. Then the piece on the far end would fold first, and then the piece with the Velcro. And you can make this with or without straps. You could make it with handles that are made from wooden spoons. So it's a great gift idea that you could do. And Brenda says that she's made several of these as gifts, and the people that she's given them to have always loved them. So Brenda, did you do them on your long arm machine, or did you do them on your sewing machine? Because now, doing them on the long arm machine, you can get them done quite quickly. Again, they could be bound, or they could be serged edges, but there's lots of options. So think about pre-quilting your fabric on your quilting machine, and now you've got a way to make something for the kitchen. My grandmother loved all of her appliances covered. She even had an old metal bread box, and she loved the appliances covered. And I have a few that are covered, and a way to do that is to make the quilted covers. Now these are store-bought covers, so just looking at these, you can see they've just channel quilted them. Well, that means that if they can channel quilt them and they look nice, think about all the decorative things that you can add in your quilting. It could be a piece, again, that you free motion on, could be a piece that you test a design on, but it's not something that's going to get wasted. So let me go through what we're going to do. You have a blender, maybe you have a toaster, a food processor, maybe you have a toaster oven. My husband loves toaster ovens as opposed to toasters. So we have this huge toaster oven. You have a waffle iron maybe. You have a coffee pot. Make a note to yourself, when covering any of these, you definitely want to unplug them, okay? You don't want to have them covered when they're plugged. You're going to make a pattern. Now, I usually make my patterns with a newspaper. So I measure the height, all of that, and test it all out, make sure that the newspaper pieces are the right size, and then I use some painter's tape and tape them together and make sure that it's going to fit over top. You want to have enough space for the width. So when you look at this piece here on the lower right-hand corner, you want to have enough space so the width of the toaster, you want to make sure that it can show up there. And when it shows up, you want to have that with just a little bit of a fudge factor. So maybe the dimension around the blender, is different than it would be if you added everything up. So what I do is I take the length of my blender, not height, from left to right. That will be the front piece. I do 2 of those, plus an inch around again. And then I measure from the front to the back and add an inch and go all the way over top with one long piece. Now, this brown one does have pockets in it. So I saw this at a store, and it has pockets in it. So those pockets are really nice, maybe to put some of the extra parts that go to it. So your food processor, you might want pockets for that unit because it has extra things that go to it. So just some thoughts. Now, the waffle iron, here's the thing about the waffle iron. I have a waffle iron that the pieces come out of so you can wash it. It was a gift from my husband this year. I had a waffle iron that I had had for over 30 years. It was the first waffle iron I had ever bought, and it was getting in pretty bad shape. So I have the waffle iron, and he bought me the new one, and it comes with a griddle, a panini press, and then the waffle iron pieces. And so I made quilted holders for each of those pieces to go into so that it doesn't mar the Teflon coating. I also made quilted pieces that go inside my pans so that when I stack my pans, they don't mar each other. And I had bought a set of those from Pampered Chef, and I really liked them. And then once I purchased them, I said, you know, I could make a set of these that are quilted. So the next set I made, and they're quilted, so they help to keep things nice in my kitchen area. So the kitchen isn't always where we think of that we could do quilting. The kitchen is a place where we can add some quilting, and you never know what might be something that we could put in our kitchen or have in our kitchen that could be quilted, unless we think a little outside of the box. So one of the things I'm going to show you is some ways to think. So I have the tater tot batting. This is similar to what I would call a specialty batting. And there are lots of specialty battings. And the tater tot batting is really made to go into the microwave and for you to have the ability to microwave it without it getting damaged. Now, maybe you like coffee. Okay, I'm a coffee drinker. So maybe you found the coffee cups in this something you love. Now, if you are someone that does not have robotics and you free motion, for your personal use, you could scan in those coffee cups or draw a coffee cup and turn that into a design. Now, you would draw that with your golden threads paper and have the ability to make your own pattern. And once you do that, then you can make multiple patterns, or if you just want one, you could make one. Or if you have robotics, you could make one that you put into software or you record and then you repeat. So this is the golden threads paper, and I would put the coffee cup on the scanner. I would enlarge it as large as I could go, and then I would turn it into a pattern that would go inside of my placemats, that could go on all different things that I was going to do. And then I would make lots and lots and lots. The next one I have, which I think is really fun, maybe you're an outdoors person and you like to cook out. So this fabric is grilling fabric. This would be great to make placemats for on your porch or on your picnic table, or a table runner for on your picnic table. Again, I would pick things outside of the fabric or inside of the fabric that I would stitch and have some fun with. Maybe you like sushi. So look at your fabrics, look at the themes, see what it is that you could pull from the fabric. You don't have to overthink it that way. This simple little cup right here. This fabric is bags of coffee. Maybe you like birds and you want some simple little birds. Those are little bluebirds. So there are lots of different things that you could choose from. Here's wine. And what's really fun with this fabric, as with most fabric, they have companions. So we have a few companion fabrics here that go with it, and you could make table runners, placemats. You could even make napkins. So there are lots of things that we can do for the kitchen. This product that I'm showing you next is a foundation batting. This is called Simply Stable. I'll let the camera focus. And the Simply Stable is a foundation batting that allows us to have stability without it being too heavy. So it's very flexible. I use this often in my placemats and table runners. So you want to make sure you have the right foundation, the right batting to do what you're going to do. Now this particular unit that you see stitched out on the frame, that is a project inside the Quilt Magician. And it is either could be a table runner, could be a placemat. It truly can be whatever you want it to be. Now I want you to keep in mind that when you're going to make table runners or placemats or things like this, we have to think about a couple things. One is, what size do we need it? What is our finished size that we need it? The finished size that we need, does that include our binding or not? The other thing we want to ask ourselves, is our binding going to come from the back and fold around the unit, or is the binding going to be separately? At the end of the webinar today, as we're finishing up, I'm actually going to show you how to attach the binding to this little table runner. And you can do it while you quilt, or you can do it when you're finished. And my suggestion is going to be that you do binding, if you're going to try it, on a small project, not a large project, because the smaller the project, actually the easier it is to be able to get it done. Now, there's a couple other little samples that I want to show you before we go to binding and some other things. This sample is some hand-woven fabric. You don't have to use quilter's cotton. This is a hand-woven fabric that is a blend of polyester, nylon, rayon, all different things. And I quilted the fabric on the frame on the Simply Stable, so it had a backing. You can see the quilting, it's channel quilted. And then I bound it. But before I bound it, I did put it on my embroidery machine, and I embroidered the corner. So think about adding embroidery, adding different things to your quilt pieces. So that's one. The next one I'm going to show you is a placemat that's a flip and sew placemat that was made on the frame. Now this flip and sew placemat, I'm going to walk you through this. You start out with a rectangle. So the rectangle we have back here could be the rectangle that we do. And what happens is you could stitch out all of the center pieces here. And then when you get to this piece right here, you would place a piece of fabric down, and I'm going to get one to show you. Place a piece of fabric down on top of it. I'm going to pick a really wild, bright color just so you can see it. I'm going to place it here. I would sew a straight line across this. Okay. And then I would flip this up, and this would become the piece that goes there. And I would do the same thing to the opposite side. So this particular one that comes with the Quilt Magician could also be a flip and sew with sections. Now you might not want to do the triangle, but it's really not as bad as what you think it is, because again, it's just straight lines. I definitely wouldn't flip and sew a circle. I would stitch all of these out and then flip and sew my ends along with the pieces that I just showed you. So when you look at this piece, the center was put down with a rectangle. Flip and sew the brown, flip and sew the brown, and then the pink, and then the pink. So it's kind of like a crazy quilt, flip and sew, but quite fun. The next piece I'm going to show you, I actually made a template for each of these pieces, okay? So I put the fabric on the frame and I micro stippled it. So when you look at, let's look at the brown one here because, or the green one, it's all micro stippled. Don't know if the yellow is going to be easier to see or not, but every piece is micro stippled. So I micro stippled the pieces. And this is an Anita Good design. And what I ended up doing was taking the Anita Good design to the frame, stitched out all those pieces big, and then when I took it to the hoop, I actually used my template, cut my pieces out, and then used the Anita Good design to stitch them all together. This was a stitch and flip piece in the hoop also for Anita Good, but quite fun. It really is something that I thoroughly enjoy doing, is embroidery and quilting and adding them together. So depending on, you know, what looks you like, what you're looking to achieve, you have a lot of options. Now, let's talk about the binding. So if this is our table runner and we're going to add binding, one of the tools that I like to use is this ruler. And it's a great ruler. It has a rounded end on one end, and it has a triangle 45-degree angle on the other end. And what I've done is I've made my binding. You're going to determine what size your binding is according to how big your seam is. So depending on the foot you have on your machine, yours may be the same or it may be different. And what I mean by that is that you may find that your foot is 3/8 of an inch from the needle. So what that means is we're going to measure the distance that the needle is from the edge of the foot. Now, how do you do that? There's a couple different ways you can do it. You could do it by placing a ruler down or a line down that ruler is going to ride on and measure it. So if I was going to do this, I could sew down, draw that line with the sewing machine, with a fabric pen, and then measure from the line to my needle. But you want to know exactly what the distance is that the needle is from the edge of the foot. Here's why. We're going to take and put our binding up on the frame. First thing you're going to do is find center lengthwise of the binding, okay? So I've made my binding. For me, I make it 2.5 inches. Normally, I make it 2 1/4. When I press it, I press my seams open. Then I press the binding in half. I find that center lengthwise. So here's my center. I find center of what the binding is going to go on. I'm going to unroll this quilt frame just a little bit to bring it closer for us so that we can see it a little easier. So keep in mind, when you quilt, if you're using leaders, you can unroll and roll it this way to bring it closer to you. So that makes it nice and easy that you can reach it better than you reaching towards your, stretching way out there. So this is a much easier process for me. So I have my center of the table runner, center of the binding. I'm going to put a pin that's going to just hold this in place for me. And it's just a temporary. It doesn't have to be in the fabric all the way. I just need a pin there. I'm going to lay this out just so that it looks halfway decent, nice, okay? And do the same thing this way. The other tool that I like to use is called a perfect mitered binding tool. I use that at my sewing machine. I don't use that as much here because I have this 45-degree angle. I'm going to use the straight edge of this tool. So it has a straight edge, and I'm going to put my sewing machine on baste. So I've gone to the sewing machine, and I've placed the sewing machine on baste. Okay, I like to start on the center out. Now I need to have this up, the seam allowance past my line of the quilt, or my runner, whatever it is I'm doing. So I've got this here. I'm going to bring the thread up. So there's my bobbin thread, and bring it back. And now I'm going to put it with my needle down. I want the needle to remain down while I do this. If my pin is in the wrong spot, so just a second here. If this pin is in the wrong spot, meaning that my ruler won't lay flat, I'm going to take that pin out of there, and now I can take my secondary pin out of there and move them out of my way. Now I'm going to lay this ruler up. Now I want you to notice that there's a notch in this ruler. So I line that right up on the foot, and I position my binding straight across, making sure that everything lays nicely. And I stop, and I move my binding again and making sure everything's lined up. And I slide the ruler as I go. Now you'll want your extension table on this. And some of you are wondering, why am I basting first? I want to place it down with a basting stitch, and then I'm going to use my stitching line, and if I'm perfectly straight on there, I can use my horizontal locks and my vertical locks for this too. But I like to baste it in place first to make sure that it's where I want it to be. So I'm basting it all the way across, making sure that everything lines up. And when I get to the corner, I'm going to stop whatever my seam allowance distance is from the edge of that piece. Now I'm going to lift my foot up, make a long tail, put my foot back down, keeping in mind this is basted, but there's my piece. Then I'm going to pin this corner. I don't want to pull on it. Pin this corner. You might have to reach your hand underneath to get to it. Okay, so that piece is basted. Now I'm going to go the other direction. Okay. Once I go the other direction, then I'm going to secure it down with real stitching so that it stays and I don't pull it up by accident. First thing I'm going to do is pull my needle thread up with my bobbin. And now go the other direction. and my bobbin thread didn't catch, so I'm just going to bring the machine forward, check my bobbin thread. I'm out. Basting is a good way to use up bobbins that I have not emptied yet. So when I have just a little bit of bobbin, so you can see here I've got just a little bit of bobbin in there, I use those to baste with, and that way I can empty them. I don't ever throw them away. Now some of you will get to where you can do this without the ruler. So I'm going to show you this time how to do that. So I hold the binding within my fingers, and I stitch to my finger, and then I lay it down, and I stitch to my finger, and I lay it down, and I lay it down. Two more stitches here at the end. Come on, foot. My foot wants to hit the piece. There we go. Okay, now I'm done basting, and it's in place. I'm going to go back to the machine, and I'm going to stitch in regular stitch regulated mode. I'm going to stay right where I'm at. I'm coming down just slightly, and now I'm going to stitch my binding all the way across. My foot is up against the back of the stitching, and when I flip this, my binding is stitched in place. I'm going to do that all the way across. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. My machine tells me I need oil, so I will oil it. Okay, and my bobbin is out again. Now some of you, that might get frustrating too, but it's more frustrating to me to have bobbins that just have a little bit on it and I need to wind a bobbin. So I never fret when I have to replace my bobbin if I'm using up bobbins that I have, especially when I'm doing something like this. I would not do this in a regular quilting design. Let me pull my bobbin thread up. Put my ruler back. And I'm holding it right up against the foot and then just sliding the ruler as I go. Now my needle is here at the end. So this is where it becomes very crucial that I do exactly the same way that I would do on my regular quilts. I have a 45-degree angle. I'm going to use that 45-degree angle to draw a line all the way to that corner. Now on this ruler, why I like this ruler is there are lines. So I can line this line up with the line that's on my piece here on the frame, and that tells me where my 45-degree angle needs to be and that I'm straight. So put my ruler back here. I'm going to stop when I get to the white line. I used a white pen on the black fabric, and I did black this morning so that you guys could see what I'm doing. I'm on that line now. Now I'm going to take the 45-degree angle, and I'm going to place the same line going down with the same 45-degree angle, and I'm going to stitch up and off on that 45-degree angle. Now I do need to pull my bobbin thread up, so I'm going to do that. This is where I put my 45-degree angle up. That's what that just gave me, and back down. Line up my foot. I tend to do just a little stitching to hold it in place. And now I'm going to come back down the other direction. Now, could I baste and or stitch? I can do either one. Because I've done this enough times, I'm just going to stitch it. So I'll come down just enough to show you what we've done. And I'll do the other side. So this piece is complete in that corner. And I always say try this on something small first and then do it on your larger item. So we have our 45-degree angle. I line up the line here with the stitching line and I draw my 45-degree angle. So I drew that on that piece. I stopped, or started, I guess you should say. I started before I got to that corner. So I'm going to sew all the way out to the piece and then come down and sew to that. Now I'm going to pause there just to see what questions you have before I go on. And I see a couple coming in right now. The name of the ruler, let me look at it and I will let you know what the name of that ruler is. Brenda wanted to know the name of the ruler. And off the top of my head, I can't think of it, but I will get you the name of that ruler. Yes, I'm using the Simply Stable and the quilt clips as I do this. I do have my bungees on. And I do take my time. You know, putting the binding on, it's not something to rush. The other thing with putting the binding on is that do it small. Do it on something extremely small to start. It just makes you more confident when you do it on something that's small as opposed to something that's very, very large. So I tend to like to do it on table runners, placemats, things like this. Sometimes I do it on my donation quilts that I do. It's a good way to practice and make sure that you've got everything going correctly, that your width, all of that is correct, you know, because that's an important element. You really want to have the right distance. So the distance becomes extremely important. I always use this ruler. A couple of you are asking if this is the ruler that I always use, and it's called the Mini Straight Line Tool. You can find the name of that on my blog. I put it there a couple weeks ago, so I just went back out there, and you can find that on my blog. So it's called the Mini Straight Line Tool. So I use this every time I do my binding. This is the tool that I use. The curve is great if you have to extend something. Let's say you're using robotics and it stops short. That curve or these ultimate curve sets, these are both good just to have on hand for specifically getting to places, and the 4-in-1. So what I did was I put all of the very specific rulers that I like here on this page. And those are rulers that I use just about every day. If not every day, at least every other day. And the quilt clips, some of you are asking what the quilt clips are. So I'll show you what the quilt clips are. And I probably wouldn't quilt a quilt without them. The quilt clips are really one of my favorite tools besides rulers, having the right needles and all of that. The quilt clips are something that allows me to get things done faster. So I'll show you those. Let me go to the video here. So these are the quilt clips. They hold the fabric and the batting on the frame so that everything can float. So when I changed my bobbin, you probably said, wow, you changed that bobbin very quick. Well, it does allow me to do things like that very quickly because I bring the machine forward, I reach underneath, there's my bobbin, and I pull it out. This also allows me to take these off and look to see that everything looks okay underneath here, and allows me to simplify things. So my question is to each of you, what are you going to make for your kitchen or your home? What other things besides the quilts that you've been making can you see yourself making now? The coasters, again, quite simple and fun. So let's review what we talked about. We did coasters, and I really like the coasters. I give them quite often with a set of glasses, just something handmade to go with a set of glasses. And so I really like coasters. I've given the casserole dishes. Brenda, just like you, I've given the casserole dishes many times, and people love it. Now, I luck out. I live by the Libby Glass Company. So the Libby Glass Company, we can get a lot of the casserole dishes and that type of thing at a relatively inexpensive price. So it's something we can often pick up. And they have square and different sizes. The process of making that casserole carrier is going to be exactly the same. You're going to measure the casserole carrier. Your pieces that go over top need to go at least halfway, if not all the way across the top of the piece. So another fun little dish. Cover. Appliance covers. Great way to do it. Now, while we're talking about this, I'm going to remove the binding from this quilt because the big thing I did not tell you, but you want to know, is that you really need to put the binding on after you stitch the row. Now I'll show you what I mean by that. We're going to go back to the video for a moment, but the binding cannot be put on what you're doing until after you quilt this row. So if I was going to do this as a real project, and I will be quilting this, I would now have to pin this up out of the way in order to quilt within that space. So you want to think about that when you're adding binding. So are you going to do the coasters? Maybe you're going to add embroidery, do some placemats, some table runners. What are you going to try on your quilting frame? Now we have some time here for some questions. So if you have questions and you're on the live session, please go ahead and put those in the question box, and I'll go through and answer those. Yes, the blog, let me go back out to it here. The blog, if you go to Google and you type in sew, S-E-W, special with Denise, the blog will come up. And so there are different things there. You can follow it by typing your email address in here. So if I wanted to follow it, I would type in my email address right in that space, and then I would be following it. You can also search. So if you wanted to know more about the batting we talked about, you could type the word batting in, and in here there's lots of information. So these are all the batting company's sheets on their batting and their reference sheet to tell you about their batting. So depending on what you're looking for, there's lots to see. I'm going to put the instructions for the little coasters on the blog, so you'll be able to do those little coasters and see those. And then I'm also going to do a flip and sew video for the little placemat. So you'll want to look on the blog to see where those are located at and then be able to do those little projects. So again, if you go to Google and type in sew special with Denise, no spaces, it will be the very first thing that comes up because it is a Google blog and everything is there. Well, hopefully you found some things that will inspire you to make some things for gifts or your home. And definitely you'll want to try this. Happy quilting!